So let's just start off with some quick introductions. We'll just go down the line here and start with Gavin. If you want to just mention what you do and how you got into the industry, start off with you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Gavin. I'm the lead character artist at Insomniac. I've been with them for almost 7 years now. Worked on Sunset Overdrive, Spider-Man, uh, oversaw Ratchet PS4. Um, yeah, and before that I was at Irrational, worked on Bioshock Infinite as their character lead. I was at Capcom working on Dead Rising, worked on baseball and mobile games and all kinds of stuff. I think this is my 16th year in the industry, maybe 17. Started doing browser-based UI and pixel art and things like that for flip phones, and eventually worked my way up into character art into where I am now.
Gavin's done it all. He's our all-star.
Yeah, good starting with him.
Don't forget NRA Gun Club.
Yeah, I've also worked on potentially the lowest rated Metacritic game of all time. So
Oh my god.
That's new to me. I didn't even know about that. Jason,
Yeah.
you want to talk about what you do now and how you got into the industry?
Sure. So I'm a character artist for Insomniac Games. I've been in Insomniac for about 4 years. I got lucky because Gavin took a chance on me.
No luck.
And I started as a programmer / technical artist for a small indie studio and studied game design at Rochester Institute of Technology, where I realized I hated it. And after a quick course in Mudbox, somehow realized that I wanted to be a character artist. After going to the Game Character Art Academy, which no longer exists, with Rich Diamond and Judson Mantov for about 3 years, I was able to build up a strong enough portfolio to get a job. So,
Sweet. Melissa, what's
Hello.
your story?
Actually very similar to Jason. I've been with Insomniac for, it will be 1 year next month. I was also somebody handpicked by Gavin. The truth. I was in school in UTD, University of Texas at Dallas, for electrical engineering, and I took an AutoCAD class, and I was like, damn, I really wish I could just do this modeling shit the whole time instead of the rest of it. Engineering was super lame and boring, so I switched over. They had a really small game program, but the professors were super tenured. They all worked in games and movies, like from Pixar and stuff, which was really weird for Dallas. So it was really awesome, super awesome program. And then I moved to LA after college, and I've been here since.
Yeah,
Killing
we've
it.
been loving it. Yeah, and it's as everyone can already see, we have a huge range of different experience levels here. So hopefully we're going to be able to give you a lot of different backgrounds from everyone from leads like Gavin all the way down to newer people like me and Melissa. And hopefully we can all offer different perspectives. Kerry, you want to jump in with your background and what you do these days?
I'm Kerry. I started in the industry in 2006, working on Lord of the Rings Online for a company in Boston called Turbine. And I was
didn't
there
know
for
you started Turbine, man. That's awesome.
yeah. I don't know your connection to Turbine,
We'll talk later.
yeah. Okay. I was there for 3 years. Worked on Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons Online, and then started at Insomniac 11 years ago, working on Ratchet and Clank for the first game that was produced or developed in the Durham, North Carolina studio, which started shortly before that, and then was one of the first people they brought on there from the East Coast. And then been here for 11 years, done mostly Ratchet and Clank games, and then a lot of the VR titles, a little bit on Sunset Overdrive. And so, just looking forward to what's next.
Cool. And not that it really matters because we're all on screens right now, but Carrie's one of us who's actually on the East Coast right now, while the rest of us are over in California. So cool to have you joining us, man. Marco, hopefully you're still unmuted. You want to talk about what you do and your background, how you got into this?
Yeah, I went to school and at the Art Institute of California, North Hollywood, that no longer exists. But yeah, and as like bad as a rep as it got, I think I lucked out, and like a lot of the like game art related staff were like at the time like working in the industry, and they knew what they were talking about. So I feel like I got a good break from that. So I got the basics from there, and how I got in the industry was that around the time I was close to graduating, I'd also taken an online mentorship with Gavin, and that really helped like shape up my portfolio at the time. And shortly after graduating, I'd applied over to Insomniac, which and unfortunately I did not get the job. Shout out to Dustin Brown. We dueled, and he was the winner.
And we got you both now.
But
and but shortly afterwards, I had been contacted, and got another opening had opened up over at Insomniac, and lo and behold, I've been working at Insomniac for about 3 years now, on Spider-Man, and that's where I've been since.
Awesome. Cool.
Sick.
And last but certainly not least, I was really happy that Jay was able to join in on this too. Jay, you've got a bit of a different background. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, a little bit different. Hi, I'm Jay. I'm a technical artist. Been in Insomniac for, I think it's almost 3 years now. But I also went to RIT like Jayson. I actually went intending to become a concept artist, but in order to be a concept artist, you have to be the best of the best. So I quickly learned that I'm slightly better at math than the average person, and I also like art. So I learned shaders probably within the last year or two, actually, of being at school, and realized that it's pretty cool, and I don't think talked about enough. I went to GEC my senior year with my capstone project, and Chris Pearl gave me a portfolio review and was like, well, we need someone a little more technical. I was like, that's fair. And a month later, I got an email like, you know what? Maybe we need someone sooner than we thought. So yeah, I've been here ever since.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
I should also mention that I went to RIT as well. So we dominate the panel.
What?
RIT graduates.
Did not know that.
Yeah, if anybody's on the fence about getting another perspective, Jay, because they can kind of bridge the gaps between different backgrounds, they can give you a really cool perspective too.
Harry, how did I not know that
Austin,
you went to
I can't believe I didn't know this.
Went to RIT.
I think it was before they even had a game dev program. But
So before this
probably.
turns into a whole RIT reunion, let's jump back into presentation here, because I want to start off with a question starting with Jayson, but anybody can chime in after that. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the common issues that you see with portfolios and just how to get past sort of that initial yes-no sorting.
Sure, yeah. So specifically with character art, I see a lot of portfolios that are just high poly sculpts. And while that is a good chunk of the job, it's not all of it. There is a huge amount of work that goes into all of the processes after the sculpt, right? Making that low poly, materials, textures, like polishing, getting the lighting right, even posing. There's a lot of artists that don't seem to pose or even have more than one real-time character in their portfolio, and that is a big hit. Sorry, it's my cat. She wants to go in the closet.
Give her a donut.
The other thing I see pretty often is people will sort of hold on to portfolio pieces that they may have spent a lot of time on and care a lot about, but aren't terribly strong. And the newer pieces are weighed down by the older pieces. So it's really important to curate your portfolio and make sure that it looks as good as it can. Every time you make a new piece or something, take a look at what you've got, maybe pull out some stuff that you don't need. And then the other big one is making sure that your portfolio fits the job you're applying for. We've had a lot of illustrators applying for character art jobs, people that are animators maybe, or motion graphics, and they have videos in their portfolio. And if there's a video, we're just not going to watch it. I'm sorry. I think this point has been tossed around quite a bit, but a lot of schools do demo reels. Do it for school and then delete it because we're probably not going to watch it, especially if there's music in it. I'm listening to my own tunes. I don't want to hear yours. Yeah, so I think those are sort of my basic ones.
Yeah, that's a good broad overview. Dinesh, the other you want to jump in?
I've actually written an article on why you shouldn't submit demo reels. If you just look up why I hate demo reels, it's about a 4-page rant from an angry old man such as myself. But I guess to give you some numbers that Jason's alluding to, for some of our openings, we have over like 2,000 openings. We look at all of them, or at least I look at all of them. And
applications, you mean 2,000 applications?
What did I say?
Openings.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That'd be
Dude,
cool.
I haven't had my my coffee yet, because I don't want to sound like a pig on mic. But yeah, so we have like 2,000 applicants for an opening. Reviewing all of them and expecting somebody to sit through like a 2-minute turnaround video is honestly expecting too much of another person. You know, we really don't have the time to look at it. So really what's going to happen is that we're going to skip through. We're not going to look at the art how you expected a person to look at it. We're probably going to miss, 90% of the work that you've presented if we even open it at all.
Yeah, I will say, like, as Gavin is looking at all of these applications, he still has to do his job at work. So he can't just dedicate like a full week or whatever to look at 2,000 applications. He's got to juggle everything. So like really make it super quick. Simple. Don't click things. Don't make things clickable, I guess.
Yeah.
As few clicks as possible.
Just use ArtStation. Don't make a website. Please don't make a website.
Yeah.
Don't even get him started on Wix. But...
Wix.com.
I should be this angry this early.
Oh no.
Yeah, the concept that I hear tossed around a lot that I think really sums it up is just that reducing friction. So even when it comes to your ArtStation website, instead of just sending out, like, ArtStation has your personalized website that isn't connected, like it doesn't have the ArtStation banner at the top, just sending your basic ArtStation portfolio, what I would get if I just clicked on your name on ArtStation, that's like just the easiest way for us to just get to know who you are in the context of sort of a website that we tend to use every day. So anybody else want to jump in on this one, or should we jump into the next?
Yeah, even on ArtStation, if you can have if you have an embedded video, there's just something about like clicking on that arrow that as a reviewer you just don't want to do that. Even though it's embedded, you're probably not going to do anything. I will say that ArtStation seems to have where you can insert like a turnaround now, and it seems to work really well so far. I was like, are people even going to watch this, or is it going to have a load time? But it seems to be good. I would say a turnaround of a character is about as far as you should ever go with a video.
Yeah, just don't make it the only thing in the submission. Make sure there's a nice, pretty image, and then your turnaround.
Yeah, I had both. I had one turnaround and a lot of pictures.
Good stuff. So, Gavin, I want to pitch this one over to you. Portfolio construction, talking about how many pieces you should have in there, what gets often overlooked.
Sure. Well, I think the number of pieces in a portfolio is generally a myth. Like I'll have a lot of people asking me about, like, is it a handful of pieces? Is it 10 pieces? Or do I need to show like a fantasy creature and a sci-fi, space marine and shit like that? Yes. But the answer is that there's no rule, right? So if you had a portfolio that had one great piece, it's better than a portfolio of 10 okay ones, right? I'm sure there's like a million different, adages or whatever about you're only as good as your last piece, you're only as good as your worst piece, and things like that. And it's definitely true, right? So if you're applying to us and you have a sea of okay work, it's going to make you, it's going to generally just lower your appeal in your portfolio. For what would get overlooked, I would say presentation. I think it's a thing that a lot of students or newer people in the industry, even like, older people in the industry that have been around for a long time, overlook lighting, posing, selling mood, telling the story within their art. I think there's a lot of expectation that, well, I modeled the character, kind of like what Jason was saying. He's like, I sculpted the character. Here's my ZBrush sculpt. I check the box of a ZBrush user, right? But that's easy to teach. Like, I think any of us here could teach you how to use ZBrush. What we can't teach you is to know what's good, right? So when you don't have that eye immediately, it's really hard to teach that. It's way easier to teach like a technical aspect. So to me, I think like the team will even agree. Like when I look at portfolios, it doesn't really matter to me if you use Maya or Max or Substance or whatever, right? Because those are things that we have tutorials for, we have knowledge on. But if you don't understand, lighting, if you don't take the time to pose your characters, if you don't take the time to tell a story in a scene, or like learn those different aspects of it, that becomes like a really bigger hill to climb for us when you join the team.
Just to jump in on that too, like telling the story should be in the piece. It should not be like the paragraph that I have to read on the side, because I've seen it.
Oh, I've never written a paragraph about
all of us here except Jay are illiterate. For sure.
Yeah, I can't even read.
And it's sometimes it can actually hurt you too, especially if your like description of it is sort of reveals something about yourself that maybe you don't want the world to know. Like maybe you can't spell the word ZBrush or modeler or something like that. So just
well, neither can we. We just
right. Pronounce it ZBrush, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The true pronunciation.
Yeah. The worst is seeing a description that is self-depreciating.
Right. Don't do that.
Please don't tear down your work like before you even give someone else a chance to look at it, because you know your work better than anybody else. All artists hate their work. Everybody hates their work. It's fine. But you don't have to like tell people how bad of a piece it is, because they're gonna believe you and then be like, oh well, I don't want a bad modeler on my team, so keep on going.
Yeah, really good information, guys. All participants, make sure you guys are thinking about questions you want to ask, because we're going through a couple of questions that I think will hit on a lot of points, but when we get towards the end, we'll be able to take a couple of yours as well. So Melissa, I wanted to send this one over to you because, as you mentioned before this event started, you were from Texas, where there aren't quite as many networking events, and suddenly we all found ourselves in a year like this where all the networking events are gone. So I thought you might have some ideas on how people can leverage online social media presences. It's not really a word, but how you can actually try to get a job in 2020.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm from Dallas. There's 2 studios, technically 3 now. There's Gearbox and there's id, and then I think Bethesda just opened a branch out there. There's not a lot, and it's super, super, super competitive. Like I couldn't even get them to respond to any of my applications. It's pretty bad. But definitely, I think now more than ever has proven that the internet is 100% a valid way to network with other people and make connections, and like really valid human connections too, not just some superficial, I just know this guy from Twitter or whatever. All of the people like let's see, Jay and Marco and Gavin and Jason, I knew them all on Twitter before I even applied to Insomniac, and not in a way of like, I'm going to follow them so I get a job. It was more, I'm going to follow them so I can see, what they're talking about for modeling and stuff like that. And then it developed into a more natural thing where it's like, oh, they're just posting funny shit posts all the time, because 3D modeling takes a year to make one model in your free time. So it's mostly just memes, and then you just connect on that whole other plane. That's really helpful. Stuff like this, people do online, panels and conversations all the time. There's forums. Like we're all children of the internet. Like, this is nothing new or anything like that, but it's definitely something that you really, really should lean into. You can also become very, if you like numbers, I really like numbers. You can become very meticulous with how you post your own work to get the most eyes on it, which is the name of the game. Like the whole thing about getting a job is playing a numbers game. You're trying to make your own luck, essentially. So you can, what I did was I would check out, the best time and day to post things, and then retweet my own stuff, engage with people commenting on it. That is the best way, I think, right now to get things to be pushed up into a feed. If you have a mentor, maybe you can be like, hey, this person helped me out or something like that, or have them help boost you, like have a list of allies who will totally, share your stuff as well. I don't know. I feel like it's pretty common sense stuff, but you just have to like be mindful of it and apply it, and it actually does a whole lot of wonders. I know a big question kind of leading into that is, should I do fan art in my portfolio or original work? Almost all of my portfolio was fan art, and fan art gets the best engagement online. Everybody sees a character that they like, but it's a little bit different. They want to share it. They have that nostalgia, and you can work that in your favor.
I will say, if you're going to do that, make sure it's at least as good or better than the other character,
Yes.
or like don't do a video game character. Because I've seen a lot of Ellies out there that are not as good as Ellie in The Last of Us, which was a PlayStation 3 title. So, just saying.
Yeah, definitely. You want it to be the best one out there. More obscure characters. I did a fan art of an Overwatch character that didn't even make it into the game, and that took off really well because I was the only person who modeled it. I don't know. Some people knew me as like the person who made that specific character because there was like one other person who made it, so that helps. But
that time of day is like what, Tuesday morning or something, I think.
Yeah.
It changes. There's an ebb and flow of the internet because like now with COVID, the engagement time is going to be totally different than what it was during a normal time, and you can check engagement of normal posts, and somebody's always blogging about it for some reason, so you could just steal their information.
Yeah, there's definitely a real benefit to being able to take off your artist hat and put on a marketing hat when it comes to situations like this.
Yeah, it's fun.
Do any of the other of you want to jump in on this question? I'm wondering about people like, Gavin, for instance, like I'm at Insomniac because we had a conversation at GDC, and if that hadn't happened, then we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here right now. Have you seen people successfully sort of replace that networking event through other means? How would you approach this if you were searching for a job right now?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm obviously a bit different because when I got into the industry, the internet was new, So for me, it was doing
the
it
Earth's
kind of
crust was warm.
Yeah, it was kind of doing it the old-fashioned way. But in the end, whether it's Twitter or GDC or whatever gathering of artists, it's always going to be about the quality of your work, right? And as long as you're your own biggest fan and like you're putting your work out there and you're constantly producing things, whatever channel that you're going through, either it's Twitter or it's going through like LinkedIn or showing people your portfolio at like drink ups or things like that, right? When those are available again, it'll be about your work, right? So definitely that's where the effort should go. Like, don't worry about followers, don't worry about clout, because in the end, it's all that really matters is how good the work is.
Totally.
And if you did drink ups, sorry Jay, if you did drink ups, then and they're not going on right now on Zoom, like reach out to the people that used to run that and try to get it going on Zoom.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Sorry, Jay.
A lot of this really is. Oh, sorry, you go first, Jay.
Oh, well, I had a longer thought on this, so if you want to continue, I can go after.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. So I had some thoughts about Twitter and technical art, actually. I think tech art posts are actually very marketable because everyone
Yes.
sees cool math and is like, wow, that's so cool.
Mhm.
But the cool thing is like some of my favorite technical artists, what they do is they show cool stuff and then they tell you how they did it. And it's like you're learning that, but you're also like very impressed with the way they can break down something. And that's kind of a lot of technical art portfolio stuff is actually just blogs or just like explaining very easily. That tells me that first of all, you like know how to solve the problem, and secondly, you can explain to me how you solve that problem in a way that like I can understand it, which is like 50% of the job.
Yeah, I was gonna say explaining stuff to character artists.
Yeah, it's constantly you're just telling people like, oh, this looks very complicated, but just so you can understand, here are the steps, or here's how I solve this problem. And I mean, a lot of tech art is like, can you solve problems for us? And can you like, do you have the ability to like think unconventionally or explain things? So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point because even as a character artist, you should be doing that in your portfolio too. Like you should be showing me like sort of a breakdown of your character. So yeah, technical art, even like illustration, like people do GIFs of their painting process. Like that stuff is just puts you miles ahead, honestly.
Yeah. So I mean, for tech art, like you can explain those things, but also like part of it too is like being able to show something flashy and like knowing what people will want to see, and just so there's like the bit of the marketing thing there too. But it's also like you see something cool and it's like well framed, so there's a bit of like the artistic eye to that. Like, oh, this is a cool thing that you're showing me, and I'm like there's the two-part factor. It's like it looks cool and I know how it works, and you're explaining it to me. So I think that's something to take advantage of if you're thinking of doing tech art. You want to get more eyes on your work.
Marco, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Yeah, it's mostly just like a general note where it's like, yeah, a lot of what everyone's shared so far. It's mostly just been like summed up into like just being very active and engaged with like most of like the game dev community, like from like being on Twitter, from going like from the drink ups and all that, even just like joining like a Facebook group or something like that. That's where I had a lot of like my engagement when I was like a student and all that.
And those are
making use-
certainly taking off right now.
Oh,
many
totally.
people are
And
on
Discord
right now.
servers.
Yep.
Discord servers, like there's so many avenues out there that where you could just participate and just engage with everybody. Like there's a lot of ways to like go about it nowadays.
Yeah, and then on that note too, the internet definitely has like the pros and cons. One of the biggest cons is that everybody can see the history of what you have said. So be very mindful of that. This industry is so painfully small that like if you start messing with one person, I guarantee like there's 20 other people who are going to hear about it from the entire country, world. Other studios will hear about it. Like it can be really bad if you
Yeah,
take
it's a
it
small industry.
in a bad
It's
way.
a
Yeah.
really important
Yeah.
note. Definitely something to
Yeah.
keep in mind. Kerry, I was wondering if you could talk to the whole tutorial situation, this issue where we see a bunch of portfolios that all have the same barrel and crate or the sci-fi dude, or how do you differentiate yourself from these assignments that you have to do at school?
Yeah, it's definitely important to stand out, especially if you're going to do, well, if you're going to do, it's kind of a catch-22 because you need to do like young, like male soldier-looking character maybe, right? Or like sci-fi soldier, because if you want to get a job working in one of these industries, if you're going to work at a company, they want to see that you can do that, but at the same time, you need to like find some way to stand out and make it look different or something unique about it. So just figure out what that figure out what angle you want to take on that like sets your work apart. And it all just comes down to like you got to utilize all the tools you have available to you to market yourself as well as possible, right? So like just if you get a class assignment, of course you want to do that, but then you got to be looking at like every way to learn some new technique to get it in there where it's going to set the work apart so that you can do this aspect of production that is going to make it look really awesome.
As somebody who just finished a really cool sci-fi dude yourself, how did you go about finding references for that? Because you are somewhat constrained because you're trying to keep it in a certain visual language for Apex Legends and Fortnite. Is that it?
Right. Yeah. How did I find it? Well, I used a lot of Pinterest for a while. Just anything I saw that was really cool, I would throw it on there. And I also think I'm a huge fan of, especially, people coming out of school or starting out. It's like, if you're a character artist, you might be really good at concepting, or you might be a good concept artist, but you don't have to be for the job description necessarily. I think this was a mistake I made earlier on in my career, and then when I was trying to get a job, is like thinking you had to come up with a concept for everything. And so I'm a huge fan of finding a good concept from a professional, really high-end concept artist, whether you've already met them or there's somebody you know, or like ArtStation is obviously an awesome resource. Just obviously make sure to give them credit, and don't claim the work that you haven't done, or explain exactly what you did. But I found a really awesome concept from Brian Sum and just kind of went off. Then of course there's tons of references for sci-fi soldiers, right? That goes back to what we said before. You got to somehow differentiate it. Pinterest is an awesome tool. That one too, there's a bit of a strategy there where you can say it's going to fit into this world, but it's not necessarily just a remake of a character that's already there. And that kind of removes the whole problem of, okay, I'm definitely not making a strictly worse version of what's already out, because that's obviously, right, we said, a huge no-no. Is that helpful?
Yeah, well, and I was asking about the process because if you're a student and you get this kind of assignment, there is this tendency to just go in the same direction as maybe all of the other students are going, and there's this homogeneity that comes out of it. But you can inject in these other visual languages through resources like Pinterest.
Yeah, well, and the ArtStation itself too. It's like just every day be on there looking at what's cool, and that you'll really develop an eye too from seeing that, because then you'll start to weed out the stuff that maybe you thought was cool at one time, or it's still cool, but you develop different ways of seeing things.
I do have a thought on this. I would say also look at a lot of stuff that isn't ArtStation, because it is very obvious when people only look at ArtStation. And I think something very important about making art is looking at things in the world and interpreting them and applying that to your work, and not just seeing something that's sort of already done what you're doing and taking that. A lot of like design sense, I think, comes from interpreting forms, or like understanding what is interesting about content, and then being able to put a spin on it or apply it to your own work.
Yeah, concept art is an entire job. You don't have to know how to do that. It's hard.
Cool. So, comparing your work to others is a common issue. Feeling just competitive against other students. Marco, I was wondering if you could kick this one off for us.
Yeah. I mean, like a common thing, at least from what we get from the few interactions we've had with students, and like a mindset that even like I had as a student, like around graduation, is like looking at your fellow students as competition, and then realizing like at graduation or afterward is, oh wait, you're not just competing with your class, you're competing with everyone pretty much around the world that's also applying for this job. So a lot of like one of the like I guess pitfalls like some early applicants and students and all stuff fall into is being like, oh, I was the best in my class. Well, that's fine. You were the best in your class, but you're not just competing with your class anymore. You're like looking into ArtStation, there are a lot of like other people that are also applying for jobs who are also like trying to get a foot in the door in the industry, and they're finding their ways to like distinguish themselves from the rest. So you gotta start looking at, okay, these are the people that are generally at my level, and what is it that they're doing that distinguishes them from the rest. So it's mostly just it's mostly just looking at that level. You don't look at like people like say like at Gavin's level where it's like, oh, he can crank out a beautiful sculpt like in a day. And that for us, it's a common thing for us is whenever he does post something, we're always just like, whoa, holy crap, how'd you do that? But that's experience that comes with time,
Yeah.
And that usually for some other people it would kind of like it would be almost a deterrent. But that's kind of setting your comparison a little too high. So it's just finding that kind of like spot where it's like, okay, what is someone at my experience level? What is the average that people expect? Or that I see in my day to day.
I would say too, Marco, like I think that you should look at Gavin or people at his level or the rest of us as a target, but understand that the rate at which you create that thing can be very different, right?
Oh, definitely.
And how many of those things you have can be very different, right? Like Gavin was saying, if you have one really good thing and it took you a year to make, like that shows potential, right? I mean, a year is a long time, but it shows potential, right? And you could do it faster next time. So, yeah,
definitely. Where it's like here's the end game, like or what comes with time. So you shouldn't get like don't get hung up on like just looking at like the Gavins that you see across the industry. You work yourself up to that. Yeah.
I kind of
everybody
think
trying to be like me sounds pretty good, honestly.
I don't know if the world can handle that.
He's a great role model.
I would say though, like as associate artists don't get a pass to make a worse asset because they don't have the experience. You get more time, but your stuff needs to be on par with the rest of the game.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so I wouldn't even look at student work honestly if I was trying to push myself to the next level, because you're just going to be keeping yourself to the less experienced portfolios. You want that professional AAA looking portfolio. That's the end goal, so might as well look towards that. You want your asset to look like it can just be tossed in a game and you'll probably get a job pretty easily.
Yeah, the whole big fish in a small pond problem is very much mitigated by the internet now, right? It's like it doesn't really matter if you're the best in a class somewhere. You can see what the world is doing, which is awesome. And I think this whole conversation comes down to short-term versus long-term goals. Long-term, you need to compare yourself to the people that are in the industry doing the best work that you see out there on the internet. In the short term, maybe you got to realize that that's going to take some patience and some time to get there. And so on a, maybe daily or weekly or even monthly basis or something, you got to be comparing yourself to what you were before. And that's like a stepping stone. And that's where you can find a lot of encouragement. It's like, oh, hey, look what I did 6 months ago. I look at the stuff routinely that I've done in the past. I'm like, I can't believe how bad that is, right? But then you didn't, at the back of your mind, you have a goal of like, yeah, you're looking up to somebody like Gavin or Raf Grassetti or just these games that come out where it just blows you away. That's what you're eventually aiming for.
And I think knowing yourself and what motivates you comes into play a lot. If you're the type of person who gets depressed or discouraged by seeing something that's super high level, then don't do that. Be nice to yourself.
Yeah, and like similar note, like get critique all the time on your work, like while you're doing it, when it's done, like, and don't like brush it off or have an ego about it. Like that critique is what is going to make you a better artist. The only reason that I got any good at sculpting was because after I finished the sculpt, the teacher would actually take it, sculpt on it, and tear it apart, right, and show me why it's shit and how it could be better. So if you can find especially an industry professional who's willing to talk to you about it, my email is always open if you guys want to do that. Happy to help with that kind of thing. Especially if you can find, we briefly touched on like workshops and ateliers and mentorships. If you can find one, it's worth the money, honestly. Like if you can afford it, or if you can find a way to afford it. Like Enrique Nespolini is doing one right now, and that dude is a crazy artist. You may not have heard of him, but he's like Raph Grizzetti level, like insane. So
He just doesn't have Melissa's social media skills.
yeah.
Doesn't shitpost as hard.
Yeah.
He could though. He's got the ability.
Yeah, I can see it coming now that he's becoming a little more public.
Yeah.
But that is a great resource, and those are just worth every penny. So, Jay, I wanted to throw this one over to you. The generalist. This is a big question for a lot of students when they're going, well, I don't really know what I want to do. Maybe I'll just try to be good at everything and get a job doing that. How does that work out?
Well, this is a very hard question well, it depends on whether you're asking for character art or technical art. I'm going to assume that you mean for technical art. But for technical art, yeah, you can kind of slide and show like a wide range of like scripting, coding, shaders, Houdini experience, and that just says, well, you can solve our pipeline problems. I will say it's still important to show that you're very good at one of those. I would think of it as like a T-shape specialty. So having a broad range of like scripting, my experience, maybe some environmental or rigging, like something where you're kind of like some pipeline, like production experience kind of stuff to show that you understand problems that people might have that they want you to solve kind of thing. Like a lot of riggers are previously animators, or a lot of TAs are previously environment artists, or something kind of similar. But I would still say it's like important to be like, okay, well, I can still make this shader in GLSL, or I can still like, write this like code at that level, I guess. So it also depends too on, beyond technical art, if you're interested in going to a AAA studio, like Insomniac or like Riot or any of those, like a lot of people are just specialized and they just do that one thing all day, and it's like they're all kind of just paid to do that thing, and then the other stuff is paid, like those other people are paid to do that thing very well. And so at that level, a lot of times you're going to need to be specialized, and if you show a portfolio with like this generalist stuff, it might be very confusing because people looking at your portfolio will be like, well, do you understand what a character artist does at the studio? But as far as like smaller studios or indie stuff, and that you're interested in wearing a lot of hats, I think that's actually pretty common. Like I see a lot of people on Twitter and with some of my friends who do a lot of things, and it's funny because a lot of them are actually tech artists who like work at small studios and make content, but also like code stuff and things like that. So I would say just have an understanding of your goals and make sure that it doesn't work against you if you're like applying to certain roles at like studios. So yeah.
I think it's like the perfect answer, honestly. The only note that I would make is that this question is something that we usually get from students who are still learning how to do the one thing right now. If you start spreading yourself thin, so usually I think a common issue is I don't know if I want to do character art or environment art, because people tell me that character art is harder to get into, so I'll just do environment art, because some people falsely believe that somehow environment art is easier.
Oh, come on, it totally is.
I respectfully disagree. You should do what you want to do. If you get hired for a job that you don't want to do, one, your work's probably not going to be that good because you're not inspired to do it, and two, now best case scenario, you're going to be stuck in a job making trees when you wanted to make characters, and that's going to suck. It's not going to be fun.
Yeah, QA is a real job, and it's hard.
It's a hard job, yeah.
It is not a foot in the door for another job in the industry.
In some places, our studio doesn't do it, but some studios you might get stuck. It might be hard for you to transition out of QA into art because they're not correlated, and they're like, well, he's really good at QA. I don't see him as an artist.
Yeah, I really like Jay's answer, and I think, Jay, while you may be somewhat of a generalist within tech art, you are also really, really good at just tech art, which is in itself a sort of specialization.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, like, if I say I'm good at tech art. It's like, I write shaders. I also write Python scripts. I do a little bit of Houdini. I do Maya scripts. Like tech art itself is a little bit of a generalist position. But like when I was hired, I was talking to Chris and he was like, well, we need someone who can write GLSL shaders. And I was like, well, I'll learn that. But it's like, again, my shader experience was just Unreal Engine nodes or like very basic like GLSL. So sort of like, we see that you have the experience, you can solve problems, but we need like very like technical knowledge of this one thing for it to be like, you're at the hireable level for us. And then they split the position into two associates. So, but I would just like keep that in mind. If you're just like, oh, I'll learn everything. I still think it's very important to understand if you're like feeling passionate or good at one thing, make sure that you hammer hard in that and show that you can do it well. Because, there are a lot of generalists out there, but for hiring you for the studio, it's like, we know you can do this one thing for us. You can solve this problem very well for us. And if you can like do more of that, then that's just bonus. So.
Yeah, certainly if you're a student, you think about the allocation of resources that you have and that you're not going to be amazing at everything. It's probably better to be really good at one thing so you have something very clear that you can offer a studio than just being mediocre at a bunch of things. They'll just always go for a specialist.
Yeah, Jay brought up a good point. We are all working in a AAA studio, so we have our biases there. So take what you want from that. If you want to work in an indie studio, then listen to Jay.
So I think we can start to get into some Q&A. I have neglected to look at the chat because I've been listening to all of your lovely answers.
They've all just been patiently listening. Unfortunate for them.
If people have questions now, you can drop them into the chat and we can try to get to those.
Question.
Did you already have one, Melissa?
No.
Okay.
I'm just excited.
While we're waiting on these, I was wondering if... Oh, we've got a couple coming in here. What ratio of original designs to designs from concepts should you have in your portfolio? So we want to
Doesn't
take a stab
matter.
at that.
If it's good, it's good.
Yeah. Generally, like when we're, at least for, again, put our AAA studio glasses on and look through that lens. But none of us really make concepts, right? Or like the original content or original concepts. So your job is basically going to always be looking at a concept and reproducing that in 3D in some form. So for us, for me anyway, as long as it's good, it doesn't matter if it's fan art, original concept, it doesn't matter to me as long as it looks good.
I will say if you're like diving in on a concept, try to get as close as you can, and then if there is some way you can put your spin on it without detracting from the look of that concept, go for it.
Oh my god, my professor gave me the best advice for concept art. When you're trying to match it, trying to get it 1-to-1 to match the white space in it, and like if you nail the silhouette, even if the inside is not quite right, you can trick people's minds into thinking that it's like exactly the same, which is a pretty cool trick, and it works really well.
Robert had a really good question. Any jobs you would recommend to do in the meantime while looking for a character art job? I feel like that comes up a lot. What should you do while you're getting your portfolio
Regular
better?
jobs, or
I
like
worked retail. I don't know, and I was a student. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's...
Yeah, could you like post an update to that? Like, do you mean at a studio or do you mean in general? Because if it's at a studio, that's kind of tricky to answer. I would not recommend like getting a different job at the studio.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you got to pay the bills, anything works, right? Or to
Yeah.
do that. But then if you're talking about if you can, I think there's a lot of disciplines that would kind of have some value if you any kind of illustration or even architectural work or like CAD stuff. Anything with just this UI, UX design would probably have a lot of carryover.
There's a lot of people that seem to get into ArcViz. You're working in tools with ArcViz, especially now. A lot of studios do Unreal, so it's a similar environment. But I would say whatever it is, make sure it doesn't beat you down into a pulp, so that you still have the energy to work on your portfolio when you get home.
Yeah.
I was a cook when I was trying to get into the industry.
You were what?
A cook,
A
line
cook.
There you go.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
like,
skill to have.
yeah, like before working in the industry, I was like a valet and a warehouse worker. So
Yeah, I
Whatever
mowed a
pays
lot of
bills.
lawns and waited a lot of tables. So
Well,
back in the day.
there you go,
Food
Robert.
industry,
You can
bartending.
do, as long as you're working on your portfolio and you're applying to jobs, then I think you can do just about anything to pay those bills. I'm ready to go through a couple of these a little bit quicker because there's a lot of good questions in here. I just want to make sure we can get to all of them. Corey, you'd asked is there a difference having renders in Unreal versus Marmoset? I think most of you would agree to just say as long as it's in a real-time environment, that's really what we're looking for.
Doesn't
Say
matter.
nods. Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
our own stuff anyway. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
There you go.
I will say, if you're doing either of those for tech art, just like if you're doing a Marmoset, then like if you're like, oh, I wrote the Marmoset shader for that, or versus like, here's my Unreal nodes, just make sure you can show it in a way that makes sense.
Good clarification.
Mhm.
From End, how do you figure out a freelance rate? That is probably a really good question. I think Google is a really good source for that. Sorry.
Yeah, none of
I'm
us are
sure-
freelancers,
well,
unfortunately.
mean-
Xavier has a really good write-up on.
Sounds like
Yeah,
we
I
got
think,
some answers.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of it would be basing your cost of living, and then padding what you need for saving against that, right?
I'm gonna post a link in the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more expensive than you think. I'll just leave it there. Charge more than
A
what you
lot
think.
more.
A lot more.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. If you're a 3D modeler, you are expensive.
You gotta be good. You gotta be good at your social media stuff as well. 'Cause that's how you're gonna be getting
Yeah.
gigs.
Yeah, freelance is hard. I don't know how people do it.
JJ asks on the topic of portfolios, how do studios usually look at animators' work? Are their reels better or individual pieces?
I've never been an animator. I'm not sure.
If you're an animator, you should have a reel. Like, I know we said don't use a reel, but if you're an animator, your work moves. It has to be in a reel. If you can do GIFs, though, go for it.
I think the standards.
I don't know if
definitely
the
are real.
quality in a GIF would be good.
Mhm.
Yeah. But usually, like if it's just you applying, a lot of the reels that we've seen are just like gray characters or like blocked in colors. Like it's not really about the art, I've also seen ones that are like if we're looking at like a film animator or something like that, it'll be shots, but that kind of becomes harder because you'll have a lot of people working on a lot of different pieces of shots and stuff like that. So most of the time it's a reel of gray mesh characters and like 3D stuff, things like that.
Scott was saying that he recently pivoted from character art to enviro art, not for the ease of getting a job, just because you really like both. Would you recommend keeping up a portfolio for both environment and character art, or discarding one for the other?
Follow your heart, Scott.
Yeah, just it depends on what you want to do. And only you can really answer that. If you want to do both, you might need to transition to a studio that lets you do both, like maybe something smaller, more indie. But if you like doing one more than the other, you should specialize in that.
Yeah, I will say too, you can split up your ArtStation portfolio so that you can actually like specify a main page and then separate portfolios. If you really want to dive into that, like Living Two Lives thing, if you've ever seen a sitcom, it always backfires, but you can give that a shot. But yeah, I think what Melissa said about like a smaller studio, if you want to do both, there's definitely opportunities for that where the role will be more like 3D modeler, right? And not character artist or environment artist.
Caleb was asking, once you're actually in the industry, when you have that first character artist gig, how should you make the most out of that experience in the first year? Should they focus solely on the job or push themselves to do more personal work and develop that portfolio?
Colton, I think you should answer that question.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
You haven't answered any questions.
Let's
You
I
chimed
actually
in.
do have an opinion of this one, but it is a little bit related to how I came out of school.
well, why don't you start off? Because I'm not ready.
Personally, I find it really important to, well, maybe it's just the tech art thing, but just getting to know people that you're working with. Since tech art touches a lot of departments, it was very overwhelming because I was talking to a lot of people that were on my team, and I just had to like get used to like knowing names, faces, and like I'm interacting with a ton of leads actually. So just like taking everything in, and also the fact that we use a proprietary engine, it was just like, it was so overwhelming, just like those first few months. And it's just like, you might, like, honestly, I was burnt out from school. Like I worked my ass off to make my portfolio. So it was very important for me, honestly. Like I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do a lot of personal work. And then I tried to, and it just sucked, honestly. So for my personal experience, it was just like important because I had done a ton of personal work up until that point, to just like do nothing and just soak in the job, and just like, most importantly, just getting to know my coworkers and, you know, the proprietary software. But I think just like immersing yourself in that first. It's only more recently that I've started doing more personal shaders actually. But again, I think it was sort of like, you know, the novelty has come back to me, and it's like, I feel like have more energy after I'm working. But like that first year, I felt kind of bummed actually that I didn't want to do personal work, because I'd done a ton of that until then. I didn't really understand why, but I think it's just a case of like, you're doing so much already during the day that I would just not worry too much if you don't have the energy for it at first.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
This is something that like I could do a whole separate talk on.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to discuss, but but
right
like
now,
I haven't done personal work in a long time, and the job it does take a lot out of you. And if you can find things that you enjoy doing that are adjacent, that works really well. Like I've started actually diving into some shader stuff. I started working in Unreal just to sort of try to understand that. You know, your personal work doesn't have to be exactly the same thing that you do at work every day, because you're going to be doing that for 8 to 10 hours anyway.
Yeah,
So.
I totally agree. I think a lot of us actually draw, and I started learning comics recently, and it's like, I'm not going to be good at comics, but you know, like learning framing, a lot of other stuff.
Your comics are awesome.
It's forcing me to like think about things and like improve my eye for art, I guess, if that makes sense. So you know, it's fulfilling, and it's also like, you know, you're improving skills. Doesn't always have to be, but you know, something that kind of enriches you, but also like restores your energy after a whole day.
And Gavin's in Excel all day, and then he actually enjoys jumping into ZBrush again.
Yeah,
Imagine
that's the real trick.
Yeah, I mean, the name of the game is that you want to stay in the industry for a really long time. This isn't a sprint, you know, it's a marathon, and you need to do a really healthy work-life balance from the get-go. You know, you put in your time, and you go home, relax, talk to your friends, you know, go for a walk. You need to do other things outside of your job in your real life, like the adjacent thing, like I sew, which is pretty much Marvelous Designer, but in real life.
I'm watching Gavin's face go, do you though?
Gavin's unhealthy.
Yeah, I think all of us agree it's underrated, just like work-life balance.
Gavin also sits like this at his desk, so
it's very important, you know, and just like the fact that you can value yourself, and also it means that you would value other people's time. They're like, you know, I'm going to work on this in a healthy way, and it's like, of course you will, because you know, I expect that of myself too. So
don't go on Slack at 2 a.m, Gavin.
Don't be Chris.
Or Chris, both of them.
Well, okay. Caleb, hopefully that gave you a lot of answers. Clearly we have a lot to say on this.
My spiel.
That was really helpful. And the other piece I'll just add is that for a lot of people, this is going to be moving to a new city.
Sitio.
It's a new phrase. Meeting a lot of new people, what Jay was saying about connecting with your coworkers. There are a lot of different facets to it that are outside of just sitting in front of the computer and working in ZBrush. And yeah, you're just gonna have to kind of follow your heart and figure out what isn't burning you out, so that you can focus while you're at work, and just figuring out the balance that works for you. Maybe we'll do a whole other podcast or group stream like this on just this one topic, because there's a lot of gold here.
Yeah, give your hands a break, do stretches, or you'll get arthritis like I have.
Yep, get outside.
Same.
Emil was saying, I'm an environment artist, so I want to make my way over to the US from Belgium. Are there specific things I can do to make my chances higher to get a visa and get hired in the US?
Yeah. So I have a visa, if you didn't know.
I always forget.
Mine's probably a little bit different. I'm I won't take up too much time because this is going to be an immigration talk that's super fucking boring. But I'm on TN. You might be on H-1B or O-1 or something like that. And what that means is that you have to show that you have exceptional talent. But what you have to do is show that you have exceptional talent to a border official or a government worker. So it's one thing to be really, really good, which you have to be, but it's another thing to have proof that you're really good. So when I went through mine, I had to present a lot of letters of recommendation. Like I was hitting up people from like 10 years ago. You have all the like legal backing of a company is ideal. Like getting the job first and then getting shipped over versus getting shipped over and looking for a job that usually doesn't work. Awards like for in competitions, like showing that you placed and that peers acknowledge your exceptional skill. Things like that. So basically like proof to a layman that you can show that you're better than the next person.
Publishing too, right, Gav? Like articles and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah. So doing like any, what like basically writing for websites, writing for magazines, getting like blog posts out there, getting it like picked up by like bigger publications and stuff is actually good, so that they can Google you and basically be like, oh, he's, real deal.
I know there are quite a few people from overseas in this chat. Are there other places where they could look for tips on like strategies like you're talking about?
For this one specifically, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously I would go to like immigration sites to like figure out the rules, because it is like really, it's not about getting your portfolio accepted. A lot of it is working the game, like working the system of lawyers, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is figuring that out and doing exactly what they say, pretty much.
It's kind of a bummer, but a college degree goes a long way too.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, the other thing I would add, I'm a dropout too. So for me, I had to prove a lot of my experience, my work experience, because that made up for my schooling. So for me, I had to double down on all that stuff. But that is a big reason to get an accredited education as well. But it also doesn't have to be art necessarily. Like it could be, like a different thing that you just do to, get that piece of paper.
Katarina was asking, do you like seeing process in portfolios, like sketch to high poly to low poly, texture maps?
Yes, you have to. If you
Yes.
don't, there's no way a hiring manager will know that you know what you're doing and how you got there. Especially the maps. You have to do the maps, or else like they can't tell what your UVs look like. Like that's like the whole other part of the job.
You
For
think
sure.
that's something that could be requested later? If you got an applicant that looked like it had a really good model, and then you could say, hey, do you mind sending over these other resources?
I highly doubt a hiring manager would have the time to
Too much friction.
send an email asking for more
believe-
stuff.
Marmoset viewer actually has that by default.
Yeah,
So
if you
if
can
you
put
throw that
links
in there,
Mhm.
then it can be accessible without you having to export a bunch of stuff. So that might
Totally.
be something if
Yeah.
you're not.
It's
Your shots for it.
it's Sketchfab actually that does the flats.
Oh, really?
Oh, it is. Oh,
Yeah.
dang. Never mind.
Marmoset viewer has topology, but not texture flats.
Oh, I lied. Sorry. I've seen them. But
Yeah, I love Toolbags viewer, but Sketchfab, honestly, like you can break down the model so much better. You can see what materials are
Oh,
applied. You
interesting.
can
Oh,
see the flats. You can see
something.
all the individual textures. It's great.
That's excellent. Yeah.
yeah, consider that.
How much
Oh, yeah,
back and you want to go ahead?
I was going to say also, I think the Marmoset viewer, it doesn't necessarily show like metalness, roughness, or spec gloss strictly. It's like their own output, right? So it's
Correct.
not as much information as would be in another thing.
Right. It's the
Good to know.
textures that are being used for their WebGL renderer.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. That's good to know.
Actually, I didn't know either.
Yeah. Learn something new every day.
How much back and forth do we have with riggers during the usual day-to-day as character artists? If you're able to share, what are some examples of those interactions?
You want me to go?
Sure.
every day. You know, anytime you make a change to a character, you gotta talk to a TD or a rigger, if you will. They're really important to the overall quality of the game. Period. So you're going to be working with them very closely. For me personally, if we're doing anything that requires a new rig, so we use a lot of shared rigs in order to save time. But if we're creating a new rig, there's a lot of back and forth and finding out what that joint placement is, what the rotation is going to look like, all that kind of stuff. And the best way to do that is to actually start with a block out, pass that to the rigger, have them start working on it, and then they'll do a block out rig and pass that to an animator, and it sort of goes down the chain to where you're all sort of working together, ideally, to figure out the best way to make this character move. Because at the end of the day, even though your portfolio is a bunch of stills, you know, it's about making sure that that character moves well and looks good in action.
Yeah, lots. We love our TPs.
Great answer. You guys have any specific resources on skin alphas you'd recommend?
Texture XYZ.
Done, baby.
ZBrush Guides has a good one too.
I've got a whole Pinterest section that's just like resources, and it's like dozens and dozens of things. Every time you see it, just save a thing and keep. You'll just come across stuff constantly as the years go by, where you're like, oh, this is cool, this is cool. And you kind of build up that library.
Get a friend like Jayson and steal all of his resources.
Yeah, I was gonna say sharing is caring too.
Yeah,
So
ask
share
other
with
people
friends.
for what they use.
Yeah,
Sure.
saves a lot of time.
When you're hiring, do you ever look at when you're hiring and looking at ArtStation portfolios, do you look at the blog section at all?
Gavin.
No.
I forget the
No.
blog section exists. To be honest.
I know I know it exists, but I don't read it. One, I don't have time. Two, it doesn't. I don't care. Like I don't know. Like, I don't know what else like whatever you would say. It doesn't matter to me.
Also
There's not.
can't read.
I also cannot read, so I have to have a link, and I need people to tell me what things say. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, like, there's not.
Unless
Ironically,
unless you want to be Jay.
yes.
Right.
Sorry,
Unless you wanna
my,
be Jay,
my
yeah.
answer.
So I'm speaking from a specifically art perspective. Like the work has to speak for itself. Blogs are fun though, but I don't really read them.
Yeah, I would say they're acceptable for tech art, but typically I don't actually look at that tab. I do enjoy seeing the breakdown in line. But if you have a link to a blog that has more explanation, I would definitely click it. But I don't go out of my way to look at those, or at least I don't think Chris does either.
Yeah, Paige, I feel like this falls into the same category of just supplemental things. So if you've already passed that bar, if you have amazing work, you're a cool, chill person to work with, if we can also see your process and whatever hopefully art related things you're posting in the blog section, it could push you the extra mile, but that's certainly not going to be the thing that's going to get you through the door initially. Welly said, in animation, make a demo reel. Thank you. That's not a question. Sorry. Just read through these. Is it okay to use assets and props that you didn't make yourself, like ZBrushes, substance, source textures, insert meshes from a marketplace?
Sure. I think if the vast majority of what you make is original, it's fine. And then giving credit to what you've used. I don't know if you have to mention the specific brushes that you used, unless it's an insert mesh. I guess you can if you want to. It doesn't hurt, but.
The insert mesh is an entire character that somebody.
Yeah, I don't know.
For tech art, it's pretty accessible to take other people's content and make it look better. So I think that's totally a given.
That's the job.
Yeah.
That's the whole job.
Always credit.
Yes. Credit. And then just also it's good to see a before and after if you're doing a tech art flip of something.
Sure. Yeah, we share resources at work all the time. You don't have to make everything from scratch.
Yeah, I think at a studio, there's a lot more restrictions, like a lot of those things you need to get an actual license to have it be in the game that's going to go out.
Yeah.
But then for individual work, it's I think you're paying them for their product to use it. It's just, yeah, be open and honest about what you did use. I wouldn't discount anyone's work if I said, oh, are these kit bash pieces for this, or did you make all these from scratch? And I said, oh, that this and this and this are kit bash. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of the intended use in my mind.
Mhm.
If the whole thing is like, you downloaded a character and then kind of tweaked some verts or something, then you don't want to do stuff like that, because it's fundamentally, that's going to ruin a reputation eventually. So don't do dishonest things.
We've
But, like,
probably seen that mesh too. I guarantee.
right.
Yeah,
But
I think
it's
that's kind
comes
of
down to common sense, kind of.
Yeah.
the people who are going to be looking at your portfolio are so well. I mean, think about Gavin, who's been in the industry for almost 20 years, right? He's seen every piece of art that's ever existed on the internet. If you're obviously ripping something off, he's going to recognize it.
I've seen my own art submitted to me for a job.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Do you like it?
Instantly hired.
Honestly, it's not my best work. You know.
That's the worst part.
It could have been better.
Alright.
How do AAA studios typically
skipped one.
look at tech art? Oh, sorry. Robert asks, what's the best way to find mentors?
Can I answer? Robert, I remember that you are in Austin. Austin is fantastic because there are a lot of studios out there. I guarantee you guys have a drink up. Obviously, we can't do drink ups right now, but honestly, you can just shoot somebody an email or a message and ask them to look over something. And if you're very genuine about it, you might not, like, maybe everybody's not able to do it, but I guarantee somebody will want to help or have time to now that we're all stuck at home. Just ask, yeah.
Double-edged sword. If you send that email and ask for feedback, don't brush it off. Don't like pretend that you know better, because I've gotten that before and it's like, I'm a professional and I know what I'm talking about, and you don't have a job and you're looking to get one, maybe listen to the things that I say.
Yeah, and then you'll be that guy and you'll never work at that studio, sorry. Yeah, okay, now we can get this.
How do AAA studios typically look at tech art portfolios other than blogging, which you previously discussed? What's the best way to present your work?
I guess I don't personally look at portfolios all day like Chris does. So I can't really say because I don't have that knowledge as much. But the best way to present your work, honestly, is just like making it look good. I mean, like if you're doing like environment tech art or something like that, it's like the stuff that you present your portfolio should be something that's like, okay, you know how to present this work, and this is what we expect. If we hire you, you're going to make our game look like this, if that makes sense. Or, yeah, I guess it sort of depends. Like, if you're like a rigger, then obviously show the rig in motion. Or if you're doing tools, just show your stuff working, I guess, and like show it in a way that's like when we see it, we can see where we put that in our pipeline. Like if I see a Houdini tool and it's like doing something, it's like, oh, I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh, cool. Like I know exactly how we could use you in like our pipeline, or like I know what problems you're going to solve for us. And the blogging is just kind of like helpful for seeing your like thought process, especially from like, I kind of want to know more, like how did you solve this, or did you kind of just take it from a tutorial? Like how much was your thinking, and like, you know, what were you bringing to the table with this? I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, that swings back to the breakdown stuff too, like break it down.
Yeah.
Well, he was asking, when you're working on a character from another person's concept, should you ask permission before you make the character? And if you've already started working on it and like concept artist says no, what should you do?
Oh, that sucks. It would be a super jerk move to post it anyway, I think. Definitely ask permission. It is their work. It is their thought baby. They put in a lot of effort into it. I've never met a concept artist who didn't want their stuff 3D modeled, but if they say not to post it, don't post it and just try to use that mesh for something else. If you're making a human, they all have the same amount of arms and legs. You can just use it for the next thing, so it's fine.
I think legally it might fall under fair use, where there's no way they can ever make you take it down, but you don't want to piss
Bad
people
juju.
off
Yeah.
if they really have a good reason. But I don't think it's going to be much of an issue. I don't know.
I haven't asked to use a lot of concepts I've made models of, but
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't asked a lot either, but
So naughty.
also
Just
most of mine have
100%
been
credit.
yeah 100% credit. Make sure you credit them. And then like personally, I don't use a lot of like personal work of concept artists. I use like professional work of concept artists that were used for, or maybe not used for a project, so that it's like, okay, this was from that Star Wars movie or whatever, right? And then I'm modeling that. I'm not modeling like I mean, obviously their work can be amazing. Like Ariel Perez, all of their stuff is like, their personal work is fantastic, and I want to model it. And I would ask Ariel first, but yeah.
Yeah, and there's always the possibility that if you've already finished that piece and you're applying to a studio, you can just put that in like one of the private ArtStation sections. You can just show it to that studio specifically, or that hiring manager, and just
Unless they work there.
Unless they work there, yeah. I'm also keeping my eye on the clock right now. I know a few of you may have one-on-ones coming up, so if any of the panelists have to bounce, I completely understand that. But we're almost to the end of these questions here, so for the rest of us who can stick around, we'll just keep going. Daniel is saying also, what did your portfolio look like when you finished school?
I was assuming that was a follow-up for me, so I just linked it in the chat actually. But
Nice.
I will preface this because this does come with like a very large asterisk. My work is actually a little different than what Insomniac does. But my discussion with Chris was actually, he was impressed with my design sense, I guess. Even if the work that I presented in my portfolio that was finished at the time was not, you know, Spider-Man, it was impressive like design-wise, and I had the technical knowledge of like, well, this is kind of impressive because it's not just like, oh, it's a cell shader on its own. It's sort of like, there was fog, there was like all these other things that were kind of like, you know, I did a lot more than just, you know, oh, it's slightly stylized. So if that makes sense. A lot of breakdown and thought into like how to make these things work.
Do any character artists want to add on to that as well? Or I keep going.
Finish school, dude.
What?
What was
I
that?
didn't
Gab?
even finish school.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
My portfolio definitely looked like it too. So
Mine, I had a student art contest thing that's actually still in my portfolio. I had the sculpt of the Crowfather fan art in there as well. And I had a couple of other real-time pieces that I have since purged. There was like a Wildstar fan art piece, and I think I actually put an art test in there too for this job, which I don't know if that was a good idea, but it's gone now. So
Corey was asking, for character art portfolios, should you supplement it with anatomy sculpts in addition to the full characters?
I think doing studies is good, but in your actual portfolio, you should be able to show anatomy and the full character.
yeah, if you want to do one big post of anatomy studies, we'll look at it, but that's kind of fun sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Jason was saying in the beginning, like one of the problems is that you'll end up with a portfolio just full of anatomy sculpts, you know what I mean, versus like a finished piece. So
Yeah.
it becomes harder to really judge whether or not you're a good fit.
Yeah. And just trust your eye. I mean, I've seen anatomy sculpts in portfolios, but like it was like super cool. It was posed out like a gymnast that was like folded over and stuff. It's really neat looking. Even though it was just
was
a
it Colton's
I
portfolio?
think it's Colton's.
sculpt. Was it the girl on the big ring?
Yeah.
Maybe. Really? That's you?
I mean, a lot of art,
can't
a
remember.
lot of people on ArtStation have done those. Bodies in Motion is a
They're so
fantastic
cool.
resource, Corey, if you haven't checked that out, because they have a lot of those full turnarounds. Like this girl on the ring, you can get the full
That's
turnaround. So
hilarious.
when you're sculpting, you can sort of, it's not game res, so you would need to have, this would still be supplemental, but it is a complete art piece, so you could still have it somewhat front and center in your portfolio if you have
It
something
does
that's
look super
completed.
cool. So
I would maybe just be aware too that if it's taking anything away from like how good your portfolio is overall, just don't do it. It has, but it's like kind of goes back to the don't make something that's strictly worse than another thing.
yeah.
So if it's really high quality, yes, it can show some understanding and it can be a good asset. But just be very careful that it's really, really high end.
Melissa, I'm going to aim this one at you. Kenneth was saying, any big advice for showing your stuff on Twitter, getting traction with the fans, or art is one thing, but how about getting traction with the pros?
They're all in the same Twitter sphere. All like game art Twitter feels so small. I see the same people all the time. It's a mix of, amateurs and professionals. Professionals will be looking at your stuff as well. And the more traction you get with fans, the more chance a professional will see it.
They might not be there, but they're watching.
Yeah. There's a lot of lurkers on there, and I wouldn't even worry about trying to focus on getting a professional to look at it, because I feel like you're setting yourself up for a really hard goal that's not super tangible. Like obviously you don't want to just chase clout, but you do want to try to get your numbers up for the sake of visibility, and you really have to define the difference between those two mindsets so you don't bum yourself out.
Yeah, I have a thought on this. I want to think about getting traction with professionals as much as making friends, because
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of us in the industry who are we have a lot of similar common interests, and like, if you follow someone, they follow you back or whatever, who's a professional because they're impressed with your work, then like it's not like, oh, clout. It's like, oh, cool, I think we do actually have shared interests or something. Like I would just think about reframe that. I guess because it's not like, oh yeah, I gained traction with Chris Perella. Like it's like we.
I do feel that way though.
So it's just, I think it's important to
what it's worth, I did gain traction with Chris Perella. Pretty great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's not like, I think a lot of us fall into this misconception where we think pros have somehow ascended to this new level.
Yeah, I can feel like in an out group, but it's just sort of like, just like we're all kind of chill. Like a lot of times it's like, you talk to people and then I realize later that I'm working with them. Like that was Matt, one of our environment artists, is like, oh, cool. Like I know him from Twitter, and it's because he's like super friendly. And, it's not like he followed me intending to get a job here. It was just like, oh, cool. Like I know that guy because he's super chill. So,
Every single artist has imposter syndrome. Every single one. Like from junior to senior, nobody likes their own work. Everybody thinks they suck. So they're
not all of them.
Except Jayson, sorry.
No, not me. I
There's some
definitely
that
think
don't,
my
but-
work suck.
Yeah, no, I like
Don't
what
use
you
people
said,
as
just
stepping stones.
trying to make friends.
Oh,
is
and
the
it's
way to
so
do it.
obvious.
Yeah, don't
When
be a
you're
reply
being
guy.
hustled.
We've got a couple of those.
Yeah. We all work together, by the way. Like we can see what's going on.
Yeah, if you're replying to all of us, we know. We can notice that.
Yeah, don't tweet at us asking for the Raimi suit again.
All right, we got one last question just popped up, and then we're going to wrap this up. Ryan was
Excellent.
saying,
Perfect
I have a
timing.
few years of experience. I haven't really worked in the game studio. Most of what I've done is under NDA. Besides working on personal work to fill out my portfolio, is there anything else I should be doing to help get a job at a studio? Or advice on when a lot of your work is NDA?
Gavin.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes in the face of work-life balance and stuff, but I think having personal work, if you're really trying to get out that quickly, another thing, obviously, would be having like a password-protected portfolio with NDA work, but that is a very sketchy thing that I wouldn't necessarily recommend because it kind of means that you're breaking your NDA, right? So a lot of the times it'll just be working on just personal pieces in the background and keeping that going for that inevitable jump to a new job.
Do you think there's any difference, Gavin, between someone who kind of had password protected NDA pieces where it was like, this was a canceled project, it's old or something, versus someone who's like, hey, this is the next big thing from this, a little bit more sensitive information in your mind? Would that change your perception of someone, or?
My perception, yeah, I think like fundamentally there's no real difference.
Right.
But like, I mean, I have stuff that I've shown on the sly from like cut multiplayer things from like BioShock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like that'll never see the light of day. The studio's gone. Like what's gonna happen? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But like, showing the like I've seen concept art for games that aren't announced yet and things like that. But it's really bad.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Bad look. It's a bad look.
Yeah, I would agree with them.
If you actually land the in-person interview and you bring stuff on a tablet or something, like, sure. Just be mindful of who you're showing it to.
Cool. Well, I'll just add one more. Well, thank you to everybody. Thank you to the panelists for jumping in on this, and to everyone else for the donations you guys have made. If you want, again, there are the one-on-one portfolio reviews people are doing. Check that out in the doc. And I think that's it, guys. So thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, really great questions. Thank you guys so much.
This was really fun.
Yeah, this was very cool. Thank you, Colton, for putting this together.
Yes, thanks,
Thanks,
Colton.
Colton.
Yeah.
It's feeding America.
Yeah.
All right.
Colton's feeding America all by himself.
Wow.
No, this is all thanks to you guys. Seriously. I mean, this really makes a big difference for a lot of people. I think we all know somebody who's been affected by it. So
If
Trying
you
to
guys
do
have
our
any
thing.
more questions, I know my email is open. You can @ me on Twitter. I'm more than happy to answer them. Email is probably the best way because I'll lose it on Twitter.
Joe, you can donate anytime. There's no time limit on that.
Nope.
Just make sure that if you guys are sending it on Venmo, make sure it's marked as for donation,
Yes.
Feeding America, and not for like phone bill or something like that.
Yeah, in order for us to match it, it does have to be sent to us because we have to submit it. If you want to just go ahead and donate, you can, but we can't match it. It won't be doubled, so keep that in mind. For people in my portfolio session, I will send you an email with my information. I'm sorry I'm late, but I'll get all that in there.
Cool. Anybody else have anything to add, or we good? That's a wrap, folks. Take it easy. Enjoy your weekend, guys. Bye.
No, you.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.